And when he said that, I did not believe him. And I remember looking at him and saying, I'm sorry, you're the champion of what now? Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to it if this is the first time you are seeing my face and you clicked on it. I appreciate that. My name is Jacy and I like to do story times, chit chats, the occasional rant on this channel, but today's video is going to be what I call Storytime Snippets, where they're basically mini story times, all within the same theme compiled into one video. Today's Storytime Snippets is going to be about some of the weirdest and strangest and funniest people I have ever met. Not celebrity-wise, but basically just the most memorable human encounters I've ever had. So if you like videos like this, of just hanging out with us, sharing your own experience in the comments, because I love seeing how you guys can relate to some of my more tame and mundane stories, then make sure to like this video, give it a big thumbs up so you can show your support. It really helps me out. I am also on social media. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok if you like my face and want to see more of it, as well as some of the other things I'm doing outside of the tube of you. That's YouTube. But with that being said, let's get started on some of my crazy human encounters. Actually, no, we're not going to get started. If you have been following me, this is a new little setup. It's not permanent by any means, but I'm going to test out some new backgrounds because I figured if I'm doing storytime snippets and I'm doing individual story times, why not have a new little setting for each little storytime snippet? So here I am in my beanbag. I actually got this for my birthday back in July, and I'm obsessed with it. I spend about 90% of my time sitting in my apartment right here in this beanbag chair. Don't even use my couch anymore. So this is where I do all my little reading with my reading lamp. I cross-stitch here. Let me show you what I've cross-stitched recently. I've cross-stitched here a little thing that says "Smash the Patriarchy" with little middle fingers, because I'm a basic, boring feminist, because you know how it is. So I love this beanbag chair, and I'm going to start incorporating it into some of my videos because this is really where I am in my apartment most of the time. I'd also like to point out that I spent just hours doing my makeup this morning, you know, just chilling, taking my time. And then I guess I expended all my energy on eyeshadow because I didn't feel like changing my outfit. So I'm still like in my pajamas and slippers. So you guys are just gonna have to deal with it, okay? But yeah, so that's just the forewarning and the post intro about this background. So with that being said, let's get started on snippet number one. Snippet number one involves 3 individuals that I met in one night that was just so unique that I had to make a YouTube video about it. So back in college, when I was about 20 years old, I was freelancing for some internet kind of newspaper. I don't even know what you would call it. And I would often get to go to cool events, and I'll talk about this in a later snippet too, because I have a kind of similar story. But I got assigned a project where I would go write an article about the Johnny Cupcakes launch. Now, Johnny Cupcakes, if you guys aren't familiar, was a very trendy clothing line back in the early 2010s, where it was basically a cupcake with a skull and crossbones type of look to it. I guess this guy Johnny had started this clothing brand where everything was bakery themed, and he really went super hard into the bakery kind of motif that even his store kind of seemed like a bakery. They would pump smells into it to make it smell like cupcakes in there. You'd pull out shirts from like oven sort of things and buy them at the checkout counter. So much so that people would walk in expecting it to be an actual bakery and that they're selling baked goods, and they're just like, nah, it's just expensive t-shirts and hoodies, bro. So it's just one of those brands that was super trendy and hot at the time, and I'm not like a name brand kind of person, so I actually hadn't heard of this designer or this brand at all. But I got some tickets to go to this launch event that was happening in LA, so I was like, cool, this should be kind of fun. So the launch event was happening at midnight, which is kind of odd, but again, it was kind of like this cool underground type of event that they didn't want to make it seem like a big deal on Hollywood Boulevard in the middle of the day. So it was kind of like a secret, not very many people knew about it. And I thought I arrived early, it was like 10:30. And there was a line of just 100 people. And I was like, dang it, I'm gonna have to wait in line for a freaking long time. Oh well, if you don't know, I like to talk. So I was like, well, maybe I'll just talk to people. Again, I'm here for journalism reasons, and I'm always kind of looking for the next story at this time at least. And so even though I was waiting to write the story of the actual Johnny Cupcakes launch, maybe I could meet other people I could find a profile about or to get cool quotes from, sort of thing, as one does at an event. And it's weird thinking about this now because it was as if the universe put me in line in front of one of the most interesting people I've ever met. So there was this kid behind me. He was probably 16 years old, skin and bones, just teeny tiny guy. And he was yo-yoing. So I'm standing in line and I'm just kind of watching him yo-yo, and other people are starting to watch him because he was an incredible yo-yoer. And so he's kind of doing all these crazy tricks. And once he stops, I kind of stop and I said like, hey, you're pretty good at yo-yoing. And he was super shy. Again, he was probably no more than 16 years old, very kind of nervous. And he was like, yeah, I guess so. And whenever people are kind of shy around me, I like to take that as a challenge. And so I kind of start interviewing him and I say, yeah, how long have you been yo-yoing? And he goes, I don't know, 5 years. And I was like, oh yeah, do you enjoy it kind of thing? Seeing what I can get out of him, not in the sense of yo-yoing necessarily, but just opening up the dialogue and the conversation to see what other nuggets I can get out of him. Little did I know that the yo-yoing conversation is where this story would go. Because as I'm just kind of talking to him, he says, yeah, I'm actually like the reigning champion of yo-yoing in California. And I said, I'm sorry, what? He said, yeah, I'm the reigning champion of yo-yoing in California. And I was like, no, I heard you, but I just don't understand. What the heck are you talking about? Basically, this kid who I was just watching like mindlessly yo-yo was actually a yo-yo champion. So I start asking about him more. I'm like, wait, what the heck? Like, what does that even mean? Did you win money? He was like, yeah, I won like a couple $1,000s. And he goes, but I actually make more money off my YouTube channel. And I said, say what now? Pulls out his phone, shows me his YouTube channel where he has hundreds of videos and tutorials of how to do incredible yo-yo tricks. And he said that he would get sponsored by yo-yo companies and he would get paid to make these tutorials and then kind of go and tour and do clinics and show people how to yo-yo. Which, please keep in mind, this was about 10 years ago where like YouTubers weren't necessarily making money. It was still very much for the love of content creation, that sponsorships were kind of few and far in between. AdSense was not really like a huge full-time career sort of thing, but he was making money off being a national champion of yo-yoing. I was flabbergasted. I was like, first of all, I mean, I guess if you're an expert at anything, you can make that your career. But here's this 16-year-old kid who, after talking to him, like, he's just a normal high schooler. Like, he's just coming to meet this name brand designer of who he really likes. And little do we know that he's this yo-yo champion of the world. Absolutely insane. So I started taking photos of him and I was like, okay, I need videos now because nobody's going to believe me. So he starts doing these insane yo-yo tricks. Like, before, when everybody was watching him, it was kind of like, oh, wow, that guy's really good at yo-yoing. But you could tell that this kid was so humble because once I asked him like, hey, show me like the good stuff, he was like, all right. Pulls out like 2 yo-yos and starts doing like shapes and origami. You guys get the idea. It was absolutely incredible. And I get to say that I met at one point the yo-yo champion of my state. So super hilarious. So I write my little profile about him and I am devastated to this day that I don't remember his name. I'm sure I could like look it up somehow, but I don't know if I remember the details enough of his face or whoever it was, but you gotta trust me, I can't make that up. But I met the yo-yo champion. But as we're standing talking in line, there's another man who's kind of just like quelling the audience and being like, hey everyone, thanks for waiting. Like, we're about to open up soon. Like, everybody just stay patient. Like, it's gonna be cool. And I kind of hear gasps and like, oh my God, it's him. Like, oh my God, it's him. And I was like, oh, is that Johnny Cupcakes? And they were like, no, that's Merce. Now, to this day, I'm sorry, I don't know who that is, but everybody starts kind of like whispering and taking photos with this man. And so I kind of turned to the people in front of me. I was like, who's that guy? They're like, that's Merce. Like, he's a rapper. Like, he's a very famous rapper and I guess activist. And I was like, oh, I don't know who that is, like, that's fine. But so he's kind of making his way down the line, and it was kind of interesting because everybody started taking photos with him that it felt obligatory to take a photo with him as if he was doing some sort of meet and greet line, which I think was really funny. But he comes up to us and I was just like, oh, hey, what's up? Like, are you a rapper? He was like, yeah, like, I'm Merce. And I was just like, oh, that's cool. Like, are you working this event? And he was saying, like, oh no, like, I'm really good friends with the designer. And so I was just kind of helping out the event to kind of support and, you know, just kind of keeping the audience occupied in case they're getting too impatient. So I kind of just start chit-chatting with him. And I was just like, oh yeah, I'm here really covering it. I don't really know Johnny Cupcakes. No offense, I don't really know who you are. But we just start conversing like 2 normal humans. And it's kind of one of those things that I think is so funny because it's what I would love to do if I met an actual celebrity I was like absolutely starstruck by, where in my head I think like, if you just treat them like a friend, they'll be your friend sort of thing. But then of course, if I ever saw like BTS in person, there's no way I would hold it together. I'd be having a full-on hyperventilation panic attack. Long story short, he is a wonderful person as well. He's also a political activist, which is where a lot of my more interest lied in the conversation with him. And after a 15 minutes or so, he was just like, oh, let me get your Twitter. Like, oh, we can set up an interview sometime, or like we can hang out sometime, whatever it was. So to this day, one of my flexes is that Merce still follows me on Twitter. Other people were like, whoa, that's so cool. Like, he followed you. And I was like, I don't even know who he is. He was just a really, really cool dude, and I really support what he's doing out there. And I'll leave some links below of some of the other kind of activism that he's getting into, but super cool person. And then of course the actual event begins. The line is slowly moving, and it's about another hour from midnight before I actually get in. So I walk into the Johnny Cupcake store, and it's exactly how the internet described it, where it smells like delicious cupcakes. It looks like ovens are baking red velvet cookies right then and there, but it's all clothes, and it's all kind of like overpriced t-shirts and hoodies. So I see Johnny Cupcakes kind of behind the counter doing a little meet and greet. So I walk up to him and I say, hey, like, I'm part of the press, I guess. It's for my college newspaper. But so I start asking my interview questions, and it was kind of interesting because it was more of a fan event and actual customers. People were more fangirling over him and getting pictures from him, where I seem to have been the first person from the press to kind of go and interview him. And so it was really interesting because they said like, hey, like, what about this launch is most inspiring to you? Or what about this launch is unique to some of the other launches that you've done? You know, asking journalism questions. And it seemed as though I was the first person to ask that all night, because he kind of like stood up straight and he gave such passionate and intellectual answers of like, oh my gosh, so this launch is inspired by, I remember it was a Halloween type launch where it was something like Cupcakes from the Crypt. And it was very spooky inspired and Halloween inspired. And some of his other launches were very much basic bakery things, that this was the first time he got to have a little bit of creative freedom with his brand and really expand some of his imagery and themes and launch it during the appropriate time of year. And so again, I just kind of like start talking to him. I was like, oh, that's awesome. Like, what kind of future launches are you thinking of doing? And he starts saying like, oh, like maybe this, maybe that. And it was super cool because it almost felt like he was giving me more time because he finally got to talk about something he was so passionate about. But in turn, it made me so inspired because I love talking to people who are so passionate about what they do, because it makes me passionate about what I'm doing and just interviewing them and possibly pursuing journalism, which I didn't. I'm not using my degree at all. But after our little conversation, which was so wonderful, I grabbed a picture with him and he said, do you have any like Johnny Cupcakes thing? And I was just like, no, I'm kind of just here for the event. And he says, what size are you? And I said, medium. And he turns around and he hands me a medium sweatshirt. And he said, here, like, take this. Now you're a Johnny Cupcakes fan. And I was like, dude, thank you. Like, I really appreciate it. Let me go show you. So I still have it to this day. This is my Johnny Cupcake sweater. It is so like raggedy and torn because it's now probably like 11 years old, but it's still one of my favorite sweatshirts because it fits me really well, but it was a super high quality and comfortable sweatshirt. And it's funny because I actually recently wore this in a TikTok that went super viral twice because I reposted it, which is so funny. And I'm wearing this in that video, and I would get like a dozen or so comments out of like the thousands being like, oh my God, is that a Johnny Cupcake sweater? Like, throwback nostalgia. I haven't seen that in years because I don't know if he's still a brand. If he is, it's definitely not as hyped up as it was. But I can tell you, if you're still a fan of Johnny Cupcakes, he is an incredible individual, so passionate about what he does, and I was very honored to meet him. I also know I said that this story wouldn't involve celebrities. I guess this story time kind of involved too many celebrities, so I guess I lied to you. But still some super cool, interesting stories of some very unique and odd people that I met on one night. So definitely wanted to share that story time snippet. All right, so snippet number 2 involves somebody who has the most interesting job of anybody I've ever heard. So for a little bit of background, when I was 16 years old, I was headed on a solo trip to Washington, D.C. I was invited to one of those like weird political conferences in high school, and to this day I still don't know like how legit it was, but basically I got a letter in the mail saying, you've been nominated to participate in the National Youth Leaders Conference. And I asked my friends about it and they didn't get nominations, so I was like, oh, maybe I actually was nominated. But you had to pay like thousands of dollars to get sent to DC to go to this week-long conference, and I was like, it's a scam, plus I can't afford it. But I ended up telling my grandpa about it, and he gifted me the trip. He said, this is a wonderful opportunity, a great resume builder. I would like to pay for this trip for you. And I was like, grandfather, That's so lovely. So I was able to go on this trip. However, because I was going from California to the other side of the coast, I would be traveling alone for the first time ever. So I was a little bit nervous, a little bit hesitant, but I was like, it's only like an 8-hour flight. I'll just sleep for most of it. So I board my plane, and luckily I got the window seat, which is the best for napping because you get something to rest your head on. You know, if you're in the middle seat, you gotta keep an eye on your neck control so you're not falling onto your neighbor. So I was seated on the window seat, and next to me was a nice older lady, maybe in about her 50s or 60s. So I do what I intended to do, and that's sleep. I sleep for a good portion of the flight, and then I kind of wake up and start diddly-dallying with either the TV or my book when my neighbor starts conversing with me a little bit. Now, usually I'm pretty hesitant of talking to people on planes because I love talking to people and meeting new people, but when you're on a plane and you're stuck with them, it's kind of a slippery slope because you can't really be like, okay, well, thanks, I'm done with the conversation now, and like go back to your book. It's kind of like you're stuck sitting next to them, so better not to open that door of conversation and just leave it closed. But she started talking to me, and I was receptive to it because she felt very warm and welcoming and nice, and she was asking me a lot about myself, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll talk to this lady. So she's asking me my business in Washington, D.C., and I tell her I'm going to this youth leaders conference for a week, and it's my first time traveling alone. It's probably not a good thing I was telling her that. She could have been like in a human trafficking ring. Yeah, that's probably not very smart of me, but there's a happy ending, all right? There's a happy ending. So I'm kind of telling her about myself, about my extracurriculars, about life in California, that sort of thing. So I start reciprocating the conversation. I ask her, what are you doing in Washington, D.C.? Are you visiting family? Are you there for touristy travel reasons? Are you there for business or pleasure? And she kind of giggles and she's like, I guess I'm kind of there for work. I'm from California, but I'm going to Washington, D.C. to judge a competition. And so I kind of perk up a little bit of like, a competition? What, like Miss America or some like political debate? What are you talking about? What kind of competition in Washington, D.C.? So I ask her just that. And she giggles again and she says, well, I don't know if you'll believe me, but I'll tell you. And I said, please do, Cheryl. I need to know now because you could be my ticket to fame. She tells me that she is in Washington, D.C. to be the head judge for the National Duck Calling Competition. I can't make this stuff up, you guys. So right away I'm incredulous and I'm like, I'm sorry, what now? She goes on to explain that throughout the year in several different regions and states, they have regional competitions for duck calling, where basically individuals enter and they go and try to produce the most accurate duck sound. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's exactly what it sounds like. But in these regional competitions, they have other judges who judge the winner, and then they kind of move up the ranks to the national competition. So I'm in awe. I was like, all right, we have plenty to talk about the rest of the flight. I'm sorry, what now? I asked her more about it, how she got into it. Basically, she herself used to be a national duck calling champion for many, many years, that she kind of got grandfathered into judging regional competitions, and then kind of decided to forego being a competitor and just kind of went the judging circuit. She also has a background in studying ducks. Duckology, if you will. There's probably a technical term for it. So she does actually have some type of doctorate in studying animals and ducks themselves. So not only is she super qualified based on her previous awards, but also on her actual education and knowledge of the accuracy of duck calling. And she said that the winner of the competition would get something like $10,000. I couldn't tell you, but a lot of people travel from across the country for this national duck competition that was just going to be taking place in like some hotel grand ballroom type of thing. But it was a big event. It was the biggest event of the year in the duck calling space, and I think that that's hilarious. Now, again, this was not her full-time job. She did have a doctorate in the subject, and I think she also said she was some type of professor or instructor on the subject. This was more of just like an honor for her to be a judge and to go and judge all of these duck calling. But I was just in awe of her because I was like, okay, you just became easily the most fascinating person I've ever met. That's hilarious. And so, of course, I asked the golden question, can you do a duck call for me? And she said, no, not right now. Like, it's kind of loud and I don't want to alarm anybody, but maybe when we land and we get inside the airport. So sure enough, we land, we deplane, and in the airport, I'm kind of like a little kid. I mean, I was actually a little kid, but I'm like, do it, do it. And so in the airport, she does her little duck call, like, that wasn't bad. That actually wasn't bad. So yeah, so I applauded her, I waved goodbye and bid her adieu, and good luck in the National Duck Calling Competition. So still one of the most interesting and fascinating careers and people I've ever met. So I definitely just wanted to share that with you guys, because have you ever met the national judge of the duck calling competition? I didn't think so. And I will meet the newest one because my duck call was pretty good right then and there. It got so bright, by the way. All right, next snippet. Hi, we interrupt this programming to check in with you guys. You having fun? You enjoying the video? If so, you should subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. If you are enjoying this video and you want to follow along for future story times and other videos I may be getting up to, I'd appreciate if you click that big red button below. It really helps me out, and I'd love for you to join me in the future. But I guess I'm done now. Interruption over. Let's get back to the Storytime snippets. The next Storytime snippet is going to be about the most incredible, altruistic person I have ever met in my entire life. So it happened when I was in college and I was working for the school newspaper for the entertainment beat. Now, this was the coolest beat to have because you would get tickets to the coolest events, concerts, theater productions, everything. And a lot of my co-writers would meet celebrities, musicians, you know, going backstage, going to press conferences, doing red carpet kind of things. So it was a super cool beat. However, as I've explained in other videos a little bit, I went home every weekend for college, so I didn't get to take advantage of like the really cool events. Such a shame. But every now and then I did get to cover something that happened during the weekday. So I was assigned an article where I got tickets to the local comedy improv show, and I was to write about their fundraising event that they were having. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is super cool. I'm going to like the Hollywood Improv. Like there could be celebrity comedians there or just general celebrities in the audience. This is kind of a big deal. It was like a Wednesday night. It's kind of amateur hour sort of thing. There were no big names there, but I was still super stoked to go and super excited to go get a free comedy show after writing this article. So I take my bus in, I get dropped off, head into the building, and in the lobby were gift baskets up for raffle, and that was part of the fundraising. Now, the gift baskets range from like automotive detailing to spa night and skincare. Just a bunch of different themed baskets where I purchased some raffle tickets and you kind of got to place them in whichever one that you wanted and appealed to you. So as I'm doing this, a nice man walks up to me and he goes, hey, like, thanks so much for participating in the raffle. And I was like, yeah, I'm actually here to cover it. I work for the school newspaper and I kind of wanted to learn more about it. And he said, oh, that's awesome. Hi, my name's Mikey. Like, I'm in charge of the fundraising. I am one of the comedians here at the Hollywood Improv, and I'm hosting this fundraising on behalf of my foundation. So he goes on to tell me about the actual foundation. So Mikey has kidney disease. Now, one of the tough things about kidney disease is that you have to go through dialysis in order to filter out your kidneys and stay healthy, essentially. And he said that he was diagnosed within the past year and had to go to dialysis 3 times a week. And in doing so, he found that so many people were so sullen and sad and kind of felt like that their life was over in going to these dialysis sessions. But Mikey, being a comedian for one, but just an outgoing and personable individual in general, he kind of brought a certain spark and a certain light to all of his dialysis sessions and to all the other people in the room that he found he was bringing so much more joy to their lives and just being there and creating a sense of community with all these people going through the same type of treatment as he was. So he decided to start a foundation called Life-Alysis. And his reasoning for this was people see dialysis as dying. They treat it as if you're dying and it's the end of the world. But he goes, no, dialysis gives you energy. It's what's making you become whole again. It's a wonderful treatment and it's giving you life. And he wants to call it Life-Alysis. So he's telling me all this and I was like, wow, that's incredible. Like that's the story. I don't care about any of this comedy stuff. But it was just really incredible kind of talking to him for that short period of time. But the show begins to start, so I was like, well, like, can I talk to you a little bit more after the show? I'd like to get more information, but I also need to write a little bit about the actual comedy side of things. He was like, yeah, sure, no worries. So I go into the theater and watch the comedy show, and I think it was like part improv, part stand-up, and it's funny because I remember having a wonderful time, but I couldn't tell you anything about the show itself because I was so enamored with what he was telling me and all of the passion he was exuding in talking about his foundation that I was more excited for the show to end and I could talk to him more about it. So the show ends and I say, hey, Mikey, like, can we set up an interview? Like, I'd love to get your perspective more and not make this so much about a comedy show doing fundraising for you, but really make it a more holistic profile on you and your foundation. And he says to me, he says, sure, would you like to come to one of my dialysis sessions? And I was kind of taken aback because I was like, I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know what that entails. I don't know what that means. Like, is it in a hospital? Am I allowed to be in the room? But yes, absolutely. That's going to make this story truly stand out, I'll be there. We set up our interview and I head to a dialysis clinic, which is really interesting because I would always see them like driving by on the freeway and be like, oh, DaVita dialysis kind of thing. But I didn't really understand what dialysis was and what these clinics did until I went and visited. So I walk in and it was basically, it felt like a giant hospital room, almost like, it felt kind of like a war hospital room where they just had beds all in one like gymnasium type of thing. And there were about 10 individuals on their specific beds and they had curtains like in between and they were all hooked up to machines. And immediately it was concerning. Like it felt very, very worrying and like, whoa, this is serious. Like I thought dialysis was just kind of like a quick treatment. Like what's going on here? So I see in the corner, Mikey sitting on his bed and he goes, Jacy, over here, over here. And again, he just like lights up the room. You can feel his energy and I immediately gravitate towards him. And he begins kind of explaining the process. Mikey goes on to explain the following. Basically, your kidneys are in charge of removing waste from your body and transporting blood throughout your body, that when you have kidney failure, this stops happening. So you require dialysis to kind of keep things moving, flush out the system, and prevent any excess water from building up in your body. He explained that his kidneys had only recently failed, and so he had started going to dialysis 3 to 4 times a week. And right away I'm thinking like, oh, okay, like that's an everyday kind of routine. But people go to the gym that amount of time. So if it's a matter of keeping your body healthy, it makes sense. But he explained that his dialysis sessions were about 3 to 4 hours each. So roughly 12 to 16 hours of his week were spent laying on a bed getting dialysis treatments. And it kind of clicked for me of like, yeah, no wonder people get so sullen and so defeated when they have to go through dialysis. That is a huge chunk of their week just stuck laying there on a bed getting fluids run throughout their body. I asked him, do you have to get dialysis? Is there a cure sort of thing? And he said the only cure is to get a kidney transplant, which again is something that I'm like, yeah, you hear about that, but I've never actually met somebody going through it. That this is all kind of starting to make sense and I didn't realize the gravity and the situation of it all. So as I'm interviewing him, he tells me more about his Lifealysis Foundation, where he started this nonprofit basically to create a sense of community for these people he was spending so many hours with. I mean, again, 16 hours a week surrounded by the same people who have kind of like these regulated routines and schedules. He wanted to start a nonprofit to not only keep their spirits alive, but to encourage them to keep fighting the fight and live life to their fullest despite this debilitating kidney disease. But it was incredible because the Lifealysis Foundation was doing like simple things that were making the biggest difference. I remember he was telling me that they raised enough money to kind of take everybody to the movies and rent a bus and just go to the movies and create like this night out for this group of dialysis patients. And he said that since then it was just kind of like, he's never felt closer to these people and they have never been happier. He was telling me that a few of them got to go on Let's Make a Deal, dressed up as kidneys, and they actually got called down and were able to promote the Lifealysis Foundation, encourage people to look into possibly donating a kidney or donating money just to kind of make a difference in these people's lives. He'd also shared that they're just raising money to buy games to play within the clinic while they're all sitting there for hours and hours, and other type of outreach events where they can go and try to promote people to look into donating a kidney or donating money towards other kidney disease research foundations. And it was so fascinating to me because here he is telling me about this debilitating treatment that he has to go through every week with the biggest smile on his face, just exuding the most positive, optimistic energy of anybody I've ever met. And it was easily, in all of the interviews I've done in my journalism career, he was easily my favorite subject I've ever interviewed because he was so positive, so inspiring, but also just so passionate about what he was doing that I left that dialysis clinic almost feeling high in the sense of, wow, I wish I was passionate about something like that, or I wish I had as much optimism as he had, because he has such a zest for life that he could be laying in a hospital bed for 16 hours a week and still find a way to make up for it on the weekends and live his life to the fullest. It was absolutely incredible. So I wrote my article, and honestly, I wish I was better at keeping copies of those things, but I wrote my article, it got published in the newspaper, no big deal. But Mikey became a friend of mine, especially through Facebook, for many, many years, where I was following his foundation. I would try to go to any kind of events they would have. I'd donate money where I could. But it was so incredible following him specifically, and again, just seeing kind of the circuit that he made, promoting his foundation and promoting the idea that people should donate a kidney, that in fact, a few years later, he was able to find a kidney match and he has since undergone a kidney transplant and no longer has to go through dialysis. Absolutely incredible. It was also one of those things too, where I remember he'd be posting about it and I was like, should I donate a kidney kind of thing? And it's weird. I wouldn't say it's a regret, but it's one of those things of like, I I kind of could have donated a kidney to this guy. I have no idea if I was a match by any means, and I know my lifestyle at the time did not really permit it for the timing, but just kind of one of those things that he was the only person in the whole world who I would consider donating an organ to after meeting him as a stranger, because he was just so inspiring. Now, I don't believe he's still running his own Lifalysis Foundation. I think he's kind of taken a step back to focus on more personal and career initiatives. However, there is another Lifalysis organization that is an even larger nonprofit that kind of has the same idea that he has. So I'll leave a link to that below if you guys want to consider donating or even research like kidney transplant, giving somebody back like 16 hours a week of their life. That's absolutely incredible and altruistic of you to even consider. But again, Mikey was one of the most incredible and inspiring people, and I hope he's doing well. And it's a story that I think about a lot, and I think, man, I wish I had his zest for life. So I hope his story inspired you guys somewhat. So that's gonna be it for these Storytime snippets. Again, please let me know in the comments any weird, fascinating, or inspiring people you have met, because I love hearing about human encounters. I love talking to people, and I encourage you all to, again, start those conversations a little bit more, because everybody has their own story, whether it's unique and interesting or passionate and inspiring, and you never know unless you ask. So get out there, talk to people safely, with a mask, hopefully, because things are getting weird again. But I hope that these stories were interesting for you guys and that you have some other stories you can share in the comments. It's kind of been one of my favorite things about my channel is hearing how everybody else relates to what I'm talking about and hearing your guys' stories. So definitely continue to share those. But I thank you guys so much for watching, and I'd like to thank you all for a wonderful 2021 here on YouTube. Again, I'm a very small YouTuber, but the community that I'm creating has really kept me going and really made this year very memorable. So I appreciate each and every one of you for that. But I thank you so much, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Toodles! I don't even like bananas.